Yuna sat in her usual seat at the far end of the Galactic Council chamber, the one no one else wanted because it was too close to the cold ventilation shafts. She did not mind. 40 years of being ignored had taught humanity's ambassador to find comfort in small, forgotten corners. The chamber was enormous, shaped like the inside of an egg, with hundreds of seats rising in curved rows around a central platform where the high speaker stood. Today, like most days, the session was boring. Trade disputes, mining rights, a long argument about shipping lanes near the Orion Nebula. Yuna noticed something, though. The Drevni delegation seats were empty, all 12 of them. She checked her datapad and confirmed they had not filed an absence notice. She raised the issue with the session clerk, a tired-looking alien with 4 arms, who simply shrugged and told her it was not unusual. Yuna did not push it. She had learned long ago that pushing got you nothing in this chamber. But the empty seats stayed in her mind like a stone in her shoe. 12,000 light-years away, Admiral Tejo stood on the command deck of the orbital station above the Pacific, watching a routine naval exercise. Earth's small civilian fleet, 22 ships registered with the Council as cargo and science vessels, moved in slow formation through the upper atmosphere. Tejo was a tall man with short gray hair and a face that rarely showed anything. His officers sometimes joked that he had been born calm. He had not. He had simply learned that panic killed people faster than any weapon. The sensor officer spoke first. Her name was Jiwoo, and she was the youngest person on the deck at 29 years old. She had been recruited straight out of university because she could see patterns in data the way most people saw colors. She looked at her screen, looked again, and then said in a very steady voice that there were over 300 unknown signatures entering the Sol system at faster-than-light speed. They were not broadcasting identification codes. They were in attack formation. Tejo did not ask if she was sure. He had never known Jiwoo to be wrong. He opened a channel to Earth Command and said 5 words. "Wake everyone up. It's time." Across the planet, in hidden bunkers and underground offices that did not officially exist, people received the signal. They had trained for this. They had hoped it would never come. But humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, and 2 world wars. Hope was a nice thing to have, but preparation was better. The Drevni fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel just beyond the moon. 312 warships, each one the size of a small city, arranged in a perfect wedge formation. At their head was the command ship of Admiral Gallon, a career soldier who had crushed rebellions on 9 different worlds. He had been told this would be easy. Earth had no registered military, no orbital defense grid, no weapons worth worrying about. His orders from War Admiral Morath were simple: burn the major cities, destroy their industrial centers, and force an unconditional surrender within 6 hours. Gallon gave the order to fire. The first strikes hit Seoul, Sao Paulo, and Lagos simultaneously. Massive energy beams cut through the atmosphere like white-hot needles and touched down on the surface with the force of small suns. Buildings turned to glass and then to dust. Streets melted. The sky above each city turned a blinding, terrible white. In Seoul alone, 400,000 people died in the first 90 seconds. The total across all 3 cities reached 1.2 million before the beams stopped. Commander Sujin was in Incheon when it happened. She was off duty, visiting her younger brother Minho at his apartment near the waterfront. They were eating breakfast together when the windows exploded inward and the world turned to noise and heat and falling concrete. Sujin woke up under a broken table with blood on her face and dust in her lungs. Minho was beside her. He was not moving. She checked his pulse, and then she checked it again, and then she held his hand for exactly 10 seconds, because that was all the time she could afford. She climbed out of the ruins and into a street that no longer looked like a street. Everything was gray and orange and wrong. People were screaming. Fires were burning everywhere. The sky above was still glowing. Sujin found a working communicator on a dead soldier and tuned into the emergency frequency. The orders were fragmented and confused. No one seemed to know who was in charge on the ground. Sujin did not wait for orders. She gathered every soldier, police officer, and able-bodied civilian she could find within a 1-kilometer radius. Within 30 minutes, she had organized 200 people into a functioning unit. She set up triage points, cleared escape routes, and established a defensive perimeter around the survivors. When the first Drevny ground transports began landing to the east, dropping alien soldiers in heavy armor, Sujin's people were already waiting in the rubble with whatever weapons they could find. Back on Paragon Ring, the news reached the council chamber in the middle of a vote on agricultural subsidies. Every screen in the room switched to emergency feeds. The images were shaky and horrible. Burning cities, falling buildings, bodies in the streets. The chamber went completely silent. 200 alien delegates from across the galaxy sat frozen in their seats, watching a species they had considered harmless being slaughtered. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. She looked at High Speaker Velthari, the ancient Oron who had led the council for over a century. Velthari looked back at her with an expression that might have been guilt or might have been fear. Yuna said nothing. There was nothing to say to people who had the power to warn you and chose not to. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. In orbit above Earth, Tejo watched the damage reports scroll across his screen. His jaw was tight. His hands were steady. He opened a broadcast channel, not encrypted, not private, but open to every frequency, every ship, every person on and above Earth. His voice was calm and hard, and carried the weight of a species that had been underestimated for the last time. "They think we don't fight," he said. "Show them what we remember." And deep beneath the surface of the moon, in shipyards that no alien had ever seen, engines began to wake up. 40 years ago, when the first alien ship appeared in Earth's sky, and humanity learned it was not alone, the world changed in a single afternoon. Within a year, Earth was offered a minor seat on the Galactic Council, the way a grown-up might offer a child a chair at the dinner table, not really expecting them to speak. Humanity accepted the seat, said thank you, and began to watch very carefully. What the galaxy did not know was that while Earth's diplomats smiled and nodded, a secret division was born. It was called Project Gumgang, and it operated from deep underground facilities spread across Earth, the Moon, and Mars. Its purpose was simple: study everything, copy nothing, improve everything. Chief Engineer Do-hyun had been part of it since the beginning. Recruited at 23 and now gray at the temples, with hands that had built things no alien had ever imagined. For 40 years, Do-hyun and his team had taken every piece of alien technology they could get their hands on, legally purchased, traded for, or quietly observed, and made it better. Not a little better, generations better. Now, 72 hours after the Drevny attack, Do-hyun stood in the control room of a facility 2 kilometers beneath the lunar surface and activated the Iron Veil. The Iron Veil was hidden inside 300 commercial satellites that Earth had launched over the past 2 decades. The Council had inspected them and found nothing unusual: communication relays, weather monitors, navigation aids. But each satellite contained a secondary system, dormant and invisible to standard scans, that could project a unified energy barrier across the entire planet. When Do-hyun pressed the activation sequence, the satellites linked together in a web of invisible force that wrapped around Earth like a second skin. Galad's fleet had been preparing its second bombardment. 200 ships lined up in perfect formation, charged their weapons, and fired. The beams hit the barrier and exploded outward in massive rings of light. Not a single shot reached the surface. On the command ship, Gallant stared at his tactical display as every damage indicator read 0. He ordered a second volley. Same result. A third, nothing. He opened a channel to War Admiral Morath, who was watching from Drevny space, and told him what had happened. Morath did not believe it. He ordered Galen to increase power and try again. Galen did. The iron veil held. It was not even straining. Then the moon opened up. 80 warships rose from hidden docks beneath the lunar surface, emerging through massive doors disguised as crater walls. They were beautiful and terrifying, sleek, angular, and fast, built with a combination of human engineering and stolen alien principles, pushed far beyond their original limits. Each ship carried weapons that did not exist in any galactic database. Tejo commanded from the flagship Horizon's Edge, a vessel that was faster than anything the Drevny had and carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. Jiwoo had been working without sleep since the attack. 11 minutes after she turned her attention to the Drevny military encryption, she broke it. The Drevny used a layered quantum cipher that was considered unbreakable by galactic standards. Jiwoo used a hybrid artificial intelligence system that her team had designed in secret, one that processed information in ways alien computers were not built to handle. Once inside, she had access to everything. Every order Galen received, every fleet movement, every private message between Drevny commanders. She fed it all to Tejo in real time. The first real battle happened near Jupiter's orbit. Galen sent 60 ships to intercept what he thought was a small human patrol. Tejo had arranged it to look that way. The patrol was bait. When the Drevny ships committed to the attack, 30 human warships dropped out of hiding from behind Jupiter's moons and hit them from 3 sides simultaneously. The Drevny fought the way they had always fought: rigid formations, predictable patterns, textbook maneuvers that had worked against every species they had ever conquered. Tejo fought the way humans had always fought, with creativity, deception, and a willingness to change plans every 30 seconds. He used tactics borrowed from ancient naval battles on Earth's oceans, from air combat in forgotten wars, from street fights and ambushes, and 1,000 years of bloody human history. The Drevny had never seen anything like it, because no species in the galaxy fought this way. No species in the galaxy had practiced war against itself for as long as humanity had. Galen lost 40 ships in 90 minutes. 40 ships crewed by thousands, disabled and drifting in the cold dark near Jupiter. Tejo had ordered his captains to disable, not destroy. He wanted the Drevny alive. He wanted them to go home and tell everyone what had happened. Galen sent a message to Morath. His voice was no longer confident. It was the voice of a soldier who had just learned that everything he believed was wrong. They were ready, he said. They were always ready. We walked into a trap that was 40 years in the making. On the ground, Sujin was proving the same point in a different way. The Drevny had landed 12,000 ground troops in the Korean peninsula, expecting to occupy a broken and terrified population. Instead, they found Commander Sujin and a growing army of soldiers and civilians who refused to break. Sujin used the ruined cities as weapons, collapsing tunnels on advancing columns, setting traps in burned-out buildings, using the smoke and dust as cover for ambushes that came from every direction. The Drevny soldiers had superior armor and weapons, but they had never fought an enemy that knew every street, every alley, every basement. On Paragon Ring, Yuna returned to the council chamber. She had been gone for 3 days. The delegates watched her walk to her seat in silence. She did not speak. She simply activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber that showed Earth's counterattack in real time. The fleet engaging near Jupiter, the Iron Veil holding, the Drevny ground forces being pushed back block by block. 200 alien delegates watched a species they had dismissed as primitive systematically dismantle one of the galaxy's most feared military forces. Young Counselor Tessic, sitting in the Auron section, leaned toward a colleague and whispered something that would later be quoted in every history book in the galaxy. They were pretending to be weak. For 40 years, they were pretending. By the end of the third day, Teho's fleet had pushed the Drevni past Mars orbit and was still advancing. The war was not over. But the lie was. The galaxy now knew what humanity really was, and it was afraid. Teho did not stop at the border of the Sol system. Every military textbook in the galaxy said that a defending species should secure its home territory and then negotiate. Teho had read those textbooks. He had also read Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, and the personal journals of admirals from wars that happened on Earth's oceans centuries before anyone knew aliens existed. Every one of them said the same thing. If you let the enemy retreat and regroup, they will come back stronger. So Teho took his fleet into Drevni space. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A minor species, a species that had been a council member for only 40 years, a species that most aliens could not even find on a star map, was launching an offensive war against the Drevni Dominion. The Drevni controlled 200 star systems. They had crushed rebellions and conquered civilizations for centuries. And now, a fleet of 80 human ships was flying straight into their territory. Teho hit 3 Drevni military outposts in the first week. His approach was surgical and deliberate. He disabled their weapons, shut down their communications, and left their life support systems running. No massacres, no burning cities, no revenge killings. Every outpost was left intact with its civilian population unharmed. Teho made sure the Drevni saw this. He wanted them to understand the difference between how they fought and how humanity fought. On the Drevni homeworld, War Admiral Morath was losing control. The surprise attack on Earth had been his idea. He had promised the Drevni leadership that it would be quick and clean, a minor species eliminated before it became a threat. Instead, his invasion fleet was shattered, his outposts were falling, and an alien navy was moving through his space like a knife through water. Morath did what all tyrants do when their plans fall apart. He blamed everyone else and demanded more power. He sent a formal appeal to the Galactic Council, requesting immediate intervention. He called humanity dangerously aggressive and a threat to galactic stability. He used words like unprovoked escalation and reckless warmongering, as if his fleet had not burned 3 cities and killed over 1 million people 2 weeks earlier. Several council members, particularly those who had always been uncomfortable with humanity, began to listen. Yuna had been waiting for this moment. She requested the floor in the council chamber and was granted it. She stood on the central platform, a small human woman surrounded by hundreds of alien delegates in a room designed to make individuals feel insignificant. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She did not beg. She presented evidence. She showed them the sensor logs from the first attack, the 300 Drevni ships entering Sol system without warning. She showed them the targeting data proving the strikes on Seoul, Sao Paulo, and Lagos were aimed at civilian population centers, not military targets. She showed them the casualty figures, 1.2 million dead in the first hour, including 80,000 children. She showed them the timestamps proving that the Council had received reports of unusual Drevni fleet movements 3 days before the attack, and had done nothing. Then she looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as she could, and spoke. You watched our cities burn and said nothing. You had intelligence that could have warned us, and you filed it as a low-priority report. You sat in these seats and debated trade subsidies while our children died. And now, when we defend ourselves, when we push back against the people who tried to murder us, you want to talk about galactic stability. She paused. The chamber was so quiet that the hum of the ventilation system sounded like thunder. You lost that right when you looked away. She sat down. No one responded. Velthari, the High Speaker, stared at his hands, and said nothing. The vote to intervene on behalf of the Drevni quietly disappeared from the agenda. It was never raised again. Meanwhile, Do-hyun had been working on something new. He had watched the battle footage from Jupiter and noticed that while Earth's fleet was superior, sustained combat would eventually lead to casualties on both sides. He did not want that. So he built the pulse lances, concentrated energy weapons that could overload and shut down an entire ship's power grid without causing physical damage. No explosions, no hull breaches, no deaths. Just darkness and silence, as every system on the target vessel went dead at once. He tested them on captured Drevni equipment, and they worked perfectly. Within days, Taeho's fleet was equipped with the new weapons. The next engagement with the Drevni was almost surreal. Human ships fired beams of pale blue light that washed over the enemy fleet, and one by one, Drevni warships went dark and drifted helplessly in space, their crews alive and unharmed, but completely unable to fight. On Earth, Sujin was finishing what she had started. The Drevni ground forces in the Korean peninsula had been cut off from resupply when Taeho's fleet drove their ships out of orbit. Without reinforcements, without air support, and facing an enemy that knew every inch of the ground they stood on, the alien soldiers began to surrender. They came out of their positions with their weapons powered down, expecting to be executed. That was what the Drevni did to prisoners. Instead, Sujin's people fed them. Medics treated their wounds. Translators explained that they would be held safely until the conflict ended. The Drevni soldiers were confused, and then grateful, and then deeply ashamed, because they began to understand that the species they had been sent to destroy was more civilized than the empire that had sent them. But the war was not over. Ji-woo intercepted a communication that changed everything. It was a private, heavily encrypted message from Morath to his inner circle. He was discussing the activation of a banned weapon, a stellar destabilizer, a device capable of disrupting the nuclear reactions inside a star. He intended to aim it at Earth's sun. If it worked, the sun would become unstable within days. Earth and every planet in the Sol system would die, billions of people, an entire species, gone. Ji-woo's hands were shaking when she passed the decrypted message to Taeho. Taeho read it twice, his face showing nothing. Then he forwarded it to Yuna. Yuna presented the intercepted communication to the full council the next morning. She played the audio. She showed the encryption analysis, proving it was genuine. She displayed technical readouts of the stellar destabilizer and what it would do to a star. The chamber was silent in a way it had never been before. This was not embarrassment or guilt. This was horror. Velthari's hands were trembling. Tessik had covered his face. Even the species that had quietly supported the Drevni could not hide their shock. Morath had not just attacked a planet. He was planning to murder a star. And the council could no longer pretend this was someone else's problem. The vote took less than an hour. In 600 years of galactic governance, no Dominion-class empire had ever been stripped of its council seat and military authorization. The process was supposed to take months: committees, reviews, debates, amendments. Velthari skipped all of it. He called an emergency vote under Article 9, the clause reserved for existential threats to galactic civilization. The evidence was undeniable. The stellar destabilizer was a weapon so terrible that it had been banned before most current council species had achieved spaceflight. Morath had not only built one, he was planning to use it against a populated star system. The vote was 214 in favor, 11 against, and 9 abstentions. Velthari cast the deciding vote himself, though it was not needed. His hand trembled as he pressed the confirmation. He was old. Older than most species' recorded histories, and he had seen empires rise and fall from this chamber. But he had never seen anything like this. A junior species attacked without provocation, fighting back with technology no one knew they had. And now, threatening to be destroyed not by fleets, but by the death of their own sun. He voted yes, and felt the weight of 600 years of failure pressing down on his shoulders. The Drevni delegation seats, already empty since the war began, were formally sealed. Their military codes were revoked. Their trade routes were frozen. Across the galaxy, Drevni embassies received notices of expulsion. It happened so fast that many Drevni officials did not believe it until the doors were locked behind them. Morath did not care. He had expected this. In his mind, the Council had always been a collection of cowards, hiding behind rules while real powers shaped the galaxy through force. He rallied his remaining fleet, roughly 500 warships, pulled from every outpost and colony in Drevni space, and gathered them at the Drevni homeworld for a final stand. And he activated the stellar destabilizer. The weapon was enormous. It sat in orbit above a dead moon on the edge of the Drevni system. A skeletal structure of metal and energy coils nearly 3 kilometers long. It needed 6 hours to charge fully before it could fire. Once it did, a beam of focused gravitational disruption would travel faster than light and strike Earth's sun, tearing apart the delicate balance of fusion reactions that had kept it burning for 5 billion years. The sun would not explode. It would simply stop working properly, expanding and contracting in violent spasms that would cook the inner planets and freeze the outer ones. Earth would be uninhabitable within a week. Tejo received the intelligence and made 2 decisions in the space of a single breath. He split his fleet. 50 ships, the fastest he had, would stay with him and strike the Drevni command structure at their homeworld. The other 30 would intercept the stellar destabilizer. He needed someone to lead the second mission. Someone brilliant enough to disable the weapon and brave enough to fly straight into the most heavily defended point in Drevni space. Do-Hoon volunteered before Tejo finished the sentence. He had built the Iron Veil, designed the pulse lances, and spent 40 years preparing humanity for this exact kind of impossible situation. He took a stealth ship, a small, fast vessel coated in materials that absorb sensor signals like a sponge absorbs water. They slipped away from the main fleet and disappeared into the dark between stars. Tejo took his 50 ships to Drevni Prime. The Battle of Drevni Prime was the largest space engagement in recorded galactic history. 500 Drevni warships against 50 human vessels. The numbers were absurd. Any other species in the galaxy would have turned and run. Tejo flew straight in. He used the moons and asteroid fields around the Drevni homeworld as cover, breaking his fleet into small groups that struck from unexpected angles, and then vanished before the Drevni could concentrate fire. He used electronic warfare to flood their communications with false signals, making them see phantom ships and ghost fleets. He sent decoy drones that mimicked the energy signatures of full-sized warships, drawing fire away from his real vessels. He attacked, retreated, flanked, regrouped, and attacked again, in a pattern that seemed random but was actually calculated to push the Drevni formation apart piece by piece. The Drevni fought with everything they had. Their ships were powerful and their crews were experienced, but they had been trained to fight in rigid formations against predictable enemies, and Tejo was neither rigid nor predictable. He changed tactics every few minutes, borrowing from naval battles, guerrilla warfare, and strategies that human generals had invented thousands of years ago to fight other humans. The Drevni could not keep up. Their formation broke, their ships scattered. Tejo's pulse lances shut them down in groups, leaving hundreds of dark, drifting hulks, crewed by living soldiers who simply had no power to fight. While the battle raged, Do-Hoon's stealth ship reached the stellar destabilizer. The weapon was guarded by 40 Drevni warships and surrounded by sensor nets dense enough to detect a grain of sand. Do-Hoon waited. He studied the patrol patterns. He found a gap, a 12-second window every 47 minutes, when two patrol routes diverged, just enough to create a blind spot. He flew through it so close to a Drevny destroyer that his crew could see the alien hull plating through the cockpit window. They docked on the weapon's surface and cut their way inside. The interior was a maze of power conduits and gravitational coils, humming with enough energy to kill a star. Do-hyun's team moved fast, placing disruption charges at key junction points that he had identified from the stolen technical schematics. Drevny security teams found them within minutes. There was a firefight in the narrow corridors, close, brutal, and desperate. Two of Do-hyun's team were killed. Do-hyun himself took a plasma burn across his left side that scorched through his suit and into the skin beneath. He kept working. He triggered the disruption charges from the central control room with one hand, while pressing his other hand against the wound in his side. The weapon shuddered. The energy coils went dark one by one, like lights being switched off in a long hallway. The stellar destabilizer died, and Earth's sun would continue to burn. Sujin led the final piece of the war. She took a ground insertion team, 40 soldiers in a fast dropship, straight to the Drevny homeworld surface, while the space battle still raged above. Intelligence told her where Morath's command bunker was. She fought through 4 levels of security, lost 8 soldiers in the process, and took a blade wound across her forearm that cut deep enough to show bone. She did not stop. She found Morath in the lowest level, surrounded by 6 personal guards. It was not elegant. It was not heroic in the way stories usually describe. It was violent, messy, and close enough that Sujin could smell the alien commander's breath. When it was over, the guards were down, and Morath was on his knees with Sujin's weapon against his head. He looked up at her with something between rage and disbelief. "Why don't you just kill me?" he asked. Sujin stared down at him. She thought of Minho. She thought of the breakfast they never finished. She thought of every name on the casualty lists she had memorized. Then she lowered her weapon 6 inches and said, "Because that is what you would have done." She took him alive. The battle ended 3 hours later. Taeho stood on the bridge of Horizon's Edge and looked down at the Drevny homeworld through the viewport. The planet was beautiful, blue and green, full of cities and life. His weapons officer reported that all orbital defenses had been neutralized, and asked for bombardment orders. Taeho said no. There would be no burning cities, no revenge, no punishment delivered from the sky onto people who had not chosen this war. He gave the order to hold position, accept surrenders, and begin prisoner processing. Then he looked at the planet one more time, and said quietly, to no one in particular, "We are not them. We never will be." Tessic, watching from Paragon Ring, sent a formal request to open diplomatic relations with Earth. He was the first alien official to do so. 3 months after the last Drevny ship went dark above their homeworld, the Galactic Council convened a special session. The chamber was full, for the first time in decades. Every species had sent its senior delegates. Some had sent their heads of state. News drones from 100 different civilizations hovered above the gallery, broadcasting to trillions of beings across the galaxy. Everyone knew what was about to happen, and no one wanted to miss it. The motion was to elevate Earth from minor member status to full Dominion-class standing. It was the fastest ascension in Council history. The process normally took generations. A species had to prove its technological maturity, its economic stability, its military restraint, and its commitment to galactic law, through decades of quiet service. Earth had done it in 40 years of pretending to be small, and 3 weeks of showing the galaxy exactly how large it really was. Even the species that feared humanity voted yes, because voting no would mean admitting they wanted to keep a civilization that had just defeated a 200-system empire in a box labeled harmless. No one wanted to be the one to insult them. Yuna gave her final address as Earth's junior ambassador. Tomorrow, she would have a new title and a seat at the center of the chamber instead of the cold corner by the ventilation shafts. But today, she stood on the central platform one last time as the person the galaxy had ignored for 4 decades. She did not talk about the victory. She did not mention the fleet or the Iron Veil or the battles. She talked about the dead. She named neighborhoods in Seoul, Yongsan, Mato, the old streets near the river where families had lived for generations. She named schools in Lagos that had held 3,000 children between them. She named the hospital in Sao Paulo where 200 patients had been in surgery when the beam hit. She described a park in Incheon where cherry trees had bloomed every spring for 80 years and now existed only as a shadow burned into the ground. The chamber was silent. Some delegates looked away. Others could not. 1,200,000 people, Yuna said. That is not a number. Those were parents and children and teachers and farmers and musicians and fools and geniuses and people who were simply trying to get through another ordinary day. They did not die in a war. They died because someone in this galaxy decided they were too small to matter. She let the silence hold for a long moment. We did not fight because we love war. We have had enough war to last us forever. We fought because you left us no choice. And we stopped. We stopped burning ships. We stopped advancing. We stopped when we could have kept going until there was nothing left of the Drevni. Because we refused to become what we had to defeat. The applause, when it came, was hesitant at first, and then it was not. In the weeks that followed, Taeho was offered the title of Supreme Commander of a proposed Joint Galactic Defense Force. It was the highest military position ever created by the Council, designed specifically for him. He turned it down. He told the Council that the position should be elected, not appointed, and that it should rotate between species every 10 years. No single civilization, he said, should hold that much military power permanently. Not even humanity. The Council was stunned. They had offered him the most powerful position in the galaxy, and he had handed it back with conditions that made it less powerful. Several elder delegates later admitted they had never seen anything like it. Do-hyun recovered from his wounds in a hospital on the moon. The plasma burn had damaged nerves along his left side, and he would never have full feeling in his hand again. He did not seem to mind. While still in recovery, he published the complete technical schematics of the Iron Veil and the Pulse Lances on an open galactic network, free for any civilization to download and use. He wrote a simple note with the files. No species should ever be as vulnerable as we were. Take these. Protect your people. Within a month, 32 civilizations had begun building their own versions. The galaxy, for the first time, had a shared defense technology that did not belong to any empire. Jiwoo was appointed to lead a new galactic intelligence cooperative, an organization designed to share early warning data between all council members, so that no species could ever be caught off guard again. She built it from scratch, the protocols, the encryption standards, the chain of communication that ensured any detected threat would reach every member world within minutes. She insisted on complete transparency. Every species would see everything. There would be no more ignored reports. No more low-priority files gathering dust while someone's cities burned. Tessik became the new Oron ambassador to Earth. He arrived in Seoul on a rainy Tuesday and spent his first day walking through the rebuilt city. The reconstruction was remarkable. New buildings rose where rubble had been. Streets were clean and whole, and people moved through them with the quiet determination of those who had decided that survival was not enough, and they would also live well. Tessik stopped in a small park, where new cherry trees had been planted in perfect rows. They were thin and young, and years away from blooming. He recorded a message to his people back on the Oron homeworld. They did not just survive, he said. They grew. I think that is what frightens everyone the most. Morath stood trial before the Galactic Court on Paragon Ring. Evidence was presented. Sensor logs, communications intercepts, testimony from Drevni officers who had been ordered to target civilian centers, technical analysis of the stellar destabilizer. Morath sat in the defendant's chair and said nothing throughout the entire proceeding. He did not defend himself. He did not show remorse. He simply stared straight ahead, with the empty expression of someone who still believed he had been right, and could not understand why the universe disagreed. He was convicted of crimes against sentient life, and sentenced to permanent exile on an uninhabited moon at the edge of explored space. He was taken away in silence. Sujin went home. She returned to Inshan on a gray morning when the clouds were low and the air smelled like rain and new concrete. The city was rebuilding fast, but some things could not be rebuilt. She walked to a memorial wall near the waterfront, a long curve of polished black stone engraved with names. Thousands and thousands of names. She found the one she was looking for near the middle of the wall. Park Min-ho, her younger brother. The one who had been sitting across from her at breakfast when the sky turned white. She reached out and traced the letters with her fingertip. She did not cry. She had cried already, alone, in the dark, in moments no one would ever know about. Here, in the daylight, she simply stood and remembered him. His laugh, the way he burned toast every single morning, the stupid jokes he told that were never funny but always made her smile anyway. She stood there for a long time. A galactic news broadcast aired that evening, summarizing the war and its aftermath. The anchor was an alien journalist from a species with silver skin and calm, deep voices. She reviewed the timeline, the attack, the revelation of Earth's hidden strength, the counteroffensive, the fall of the Dominion, the trial. She interviewed diplomats and generals and ordinary people from a dozen species, who were all still trying to understand what had happened and what it meant. She closed the broadcast with words that would be repeated across the galaxy for generations, printed on monuments and taught in schools, and whispered by species who had once thought humanity was nothing. Let the record show, they attacked Earth, and Earth remembered. 6,000 light-years away, in a small cafe in Busan overlooking the ocean, Taeho sat alone at a corner table with a cup of tea. The cafe was quiet. The sea was gray and beautiful. He had no uniform on, no rank insignia, no flag. He was just a man drinking tea and watching the waves. His communicator buzzed. He picked it up and read the message. A new alert from deep space, something unusual detected at the edge of explored territory. Unidentified energy signatures, unknown origin. He sighed, the way a person sighs when they know their rest is over. He finished his tea, set the cup down gently, and stood up. Outside, the ocean kept moving, indifferent and eternal, the way it always had. The sky above Busan was wide and clear, and somewhere beyond it, among the stars that humanity had finally claimed as its own, something new was beginning. Taeho walked out into the light.